and I'll just keep it brief. I haven't been to India in a few years now. It's been 3 years, so sorry that we can't meet in person. It would have been really fantastic. But hopefully in the coming years, we'll have a chance to do that again. If everyone wants to just take a few minutes just to quickly say hello, that would be great, and say where you're from.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kamlesh Yagnik. I work with IUC India, and for the past almost 2 years, working for various cities in the country. Thank you.
Oh, hi, hello. I'm Sanjay Punjabi. I'm working with IUC India, and I'm working with Vadodara and Kochi right now.
Thank you so much.
Hello,
Please
hi. Hi, this is Avni. I work as a project associate with WRI India out of the Bombay office. We're actually working on developing city-level climate action plans in Madhya Pradesh, and we've also done some work in Kerala, state-level work in Kerala. So happy to be here. And also, we were part of the Data Portal for Cities project, which was developed in collaboration with GCoM. So yeah, this session is extremely relevant. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We relied heavily on the WRI India team during the development of the data portal, so very glad to have you here.
Nice to meet you. Yeah,
nice to meet you as well. Okay, well, that's okay, if there's a moment. And then we've just been joined by Juliana Izquierdo as well. If you want to just take a quick moment to say hello, Juliana.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I am Juliana Izquierdo from the IUC Methodology Task Force, supporting all the regions with joint action plans.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Great. So I'm very happy to be here and to speak with you all today. The idea of this breakout room was really to focus on what I consider to be one of the biggest challenges, which really isn't the methodology and the challenges around reporting on certain pieces, such as focuses on mitigation or adaptation, but it's on the data itself. Often this, to me, seems to get overlooked in the challenges that are present for many cities around the world, if not most, in acquiring and understanding their own municipal data. So I know that the challenges are unique in every region, and I love to connect with the local circumstances to better understand how we can help as the GCoM and how we can help coordinate with the experts that are already on the ground. So today, I just wanted to have an open conversation, and we have a few framing questions to help focus the conversation, but really feel free to take this in any direction that you find useful and to convey what is most pressing for you as you think about how cities are able to acquire data and how they are doing with being part of GCoM, or if perhaps data collection is preventing them from being part of GCoM, because perhaps they feel they won't be able to acquire this information. It's really very nice to have Avni from WRI here in particular, because the data portal, which I think Amanda mentioned in her presentation, was developed particularly for this process and for this challenge, which is to really help provide data, even if it's only proxy data, for cities that want to participate and want to develop an emissions inventory. And we are currently thinking about how we can expand that product, that tool, into a resource that is even more encompassing beyond just emissions inventory data, potentially to further include aggregation or adaptation data, as well as energy poverty or access to energy data, and then how that could also integrate with existing resources to help automate the way that cities report and make it much easier for them to acquire data and share it. So the first question that we wanted to touch upon was, in thinking about how data is collected within your municipality, who in fact is responsible for collecting and providing data in the municipality, And which areas contribute to this process, and how are you handling the collection process? And this can come from experience with working with various cities, as may be the case for many of you, rather than a specific municipality experience. Any comments around data collection for emissions inventory?
Sanjay, you may share your experience of Baroda. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question and I have some difficulties which I would like to share here. So first of all, that the local government, ULB, they are not used to trust the organization like IUC or any other foreign organization. And it is very difficult for us to communicate and establish a link with them. Secondly, that few of the officers keep on changing. The key people, the trustworthiness is the first point, and their transfer plays important role. So, in that case, that probably that if any mechanism can be worked out and where that the data can be taken it up, the authentic data can be taken it up, and rather that some API can be taken it up directly from their system, so that instead of going to them, we can collect the data at the back end, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. That's a really great point. We find that that's a challenge in many places just due to the nature of city government and local officials and the transient nature of how long they remain in office, and having to build relationships again is certainly very tough. Much easier when you have trusted colleagues and don't have to reestablish that connection. Any other thoughts? Yeah, please go ahead.
So another point that in India that the city operates in a different way. We approach to the mayor and commissioner, but some of the data they do not possess. Say, for example, they have the solid waste department data for Vadodara, but so far as that energy is concerned, or transport is concerned, or any other data is concerned, they are dependent on the various other government agencies to whom that the direct control of the commissioner and mayor is not there. So it is very difficult even for the commissioner or mayor, though they write to the concerned department. The concerned department sometimes do not gel in wavelength with the commissioner or that the local power, whatever they have. So we have to move around with the different department to collect the data. The authenticity of that data is also another question. I mean, past data from 2009 to 2019, if we have to get collected, and if we even go to that some of the government's website and try to see that some of the data filled in by the nodal officers, uh, sometimes those data are not too authentic comparatively, putting up that thumb impression, I mean thumb calculation, and also correlate or re-verify with certain other sources. So secondary research available on Google and some other government government websites. Uh, I mean, which data to believe in and which past data to be considered as a base year, it plays very important and it affects a lot for the further calculation of GHG. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. That was really helpful and insightful. Any other comments around data collection and challenges with getting information around stationary energy, transport? Sounds like waste is much easier for the local cities to know that information. But I imagine stationary energy and transport, as it's connected to the national system, becomes more challenging. And Avni, maybe you have some comments on your experience in helping to coordinate that information for the data portal.
Yeah. Thanks, Shannon. I was just coming to this because this question is very relevant. That which sector is easily available, and waste is the most easily waste, at least at the city level, is most easily accessible because waste management is done by ULBs in India. So it's done at the city level. But an energy data for stationary energy and buildings is also available in some cases, but transport becomes a difficult sector to grapple with, especially because we have if we want like detailed if we want to do a detailed analysis of the transport sector, we would need like vehicle kilometers traveled or consumption of fuel at the city level. So there is we've actually tried reaching out to, so we're trying to develop city level inventories in the state of Madhya Pradesh for the 7 smart cities in Madhya Pradesh. And we've reached out to the smart city corporations. So transport is just a sector where, we will just have to come up with our own methodology. Even in fact, for data portal for cities, which has gone live, the beta version has gone live. We currently have proxy data for residential buildings, for commercial buildings, and for for municipal solid waste. But we haven't been able to, they haven't put out the data for transport sector yet because of this very issue. Even though, we're looking at information like total registered vehicles in a city, and then use that data point to downscale to get some level of fuel consumption at city level. But apart from that, I also wanted to say that we heard a lot about the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework in the previous sessions, and there are certain indicators within the framework. So, which especially waste sector specifically looks at greenhouse gas emissions, but even in the energy sector or the water sector. So, electricity consumed by wastewater pumps or water supply pumps, or energy consumption for street lighting, or energy consumption for just electricity consumption in the city or for municipal services. That kind of segregated data could be made more and more available with time, as and when cities go through this process of Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, and as and when they start filling out the information required. So most of these cities, as Mr. Mahesh had mentioned in the previous presentation, that they're in the warriors stage, where they're just starting out. They're still just talking about a lot of like climate related questions. So, I would just say that instead of sticking to traditional, like what we consider to be traditional data points, if we can look at proxy data points, and if we can look at other assessment frameworks like, the CSAF, to sort of gather data. But I think I'm also optimistic because of the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework. I think cities will start collecting information in that format, which will help us sort of develop inventories going forward. And in fact, we've also, based on the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, we've developed a self-assessment tool, which is essentially an emissions assessment tool. So what the tool does is it takes indicators of the framework and maybe a few additional indicators, and using those indicators, it gives emissions for the specific activities mentioned in the framework. So the tool doesn't necessarily give a complete GHG inventory, but it still helps cities report emissions for specific activities. So, whether it's for street lighting, whether it's for waste, or, as I said, municipal services, non-revenue water, these kind of activities. So I'll stop here. I don't know if this is helpful, but I'd also really like to hear from, I think somebody from Kochi is also here. So I would love to hear what their experiences has also been.
That's really helpful, Avni, and really insightful, given your experience in helping to develop the data portal and trying to find some of that data. Very useful to hear your thoughts around alternative sources. It's something we've talked about extensively. Part of the challenge with the data portal was that not a lot of national governments maintain nice data sets. So being able to connect to some of those data sets and then downscale appropriately for cities across the globe is really challenging. And in India, I think you guys were able to be very creative and find some proxy information that's suitable. I know one of the other challenges around emissions inventories, and if you're thinking about accuracy, I've heard from other partners across the globe that in particular, sources of using energy, but not in a formal identified way. So in other words, connecting to energy sources, but on the back end so that it's not traceable is also a challenge, because that happens a lot, say in Latin America, where someone will tether to an existing energy source, but then you're not able to accurately account for that usage. So it's something we're thinking about right now as we're developing the energy access pillar for the GCoM as well. And that has been a big topic that has come up lately. I think, Avni, you said that you'd love to hear from Kochi, and I would as well. But if it's okay, I'll go to the next question just because I'm realizing we have just a little over 10 minutes left. But feel free to jump in at any point. These are really just questions to help guide us. And so the next one is really related around mitigation and adaptation, and thinking about, what mechanisms are in place to help track performance of actions. This is a big one because it's quite easy to put into a climate action plan. Not easy, it's of course a process, but you can say that you're going to do something, but then actually showing that you are doing it and making progress is another story. But the question is really around, what mechanisms exist internally to track performance against these actions. And then a related one on adaptation is data sources that are reliable for assessing current and future hazards as well. Any thoughts or comments around tracking actions, mitigation and adaptation actions that are part of a climate action plan? No, not an exciting question. What about thoughts around data collection around adaptation, thinking about current and future hazards and how you measure the impact of those or predict the impact that you expect will happen for your city?
Shannon, if I can provide a quick comment here, and maybe, I don't know if, again, Kochi, Dr. Rajan is there, or someone from CHED. I think a key challenge for the cities is that data is limited, or in many cases very difficult to get. There are many stakeholders that are involved, and therefore, a lot of data may be outside the responsibility of the municipality. And also there's an issue of resources, especially human resources. Kochi, I think, is one of the few cities in India that I know that has a dedicated department, CHED, working on environmental issues and development issues. But I have the feeling or understanding that a lot of municipal corporations, even if they're quite big, they lack a dedicated department on climate, for example, that would address the various issues. And now I think there is an effort from some states. I believe Gujarat is one of these states. We heard from them earlier, that is trying to, let's say, instill this responsibility to the municipal corporations. So I think there is a process, and maybe in other states as well. But I don't know if CHED wants to comment on that or.
Thank you, Panagiotis. That's a really good point, and I would say not dissimilar to what we hear from cities around the world in different regions as well. Most cities don't have the resources put towards having someone dedicated to doing this process. So the sustainability department, those tend to be really part of much bigger, well-resourced cities. But most of the cities in the Global Covenant do not have these resources. So it's certainly of great interest to us how we can support this process more and help build technical capacity around this, especially in the regions, and that really understand the local circumstances as well, and understand how the local governments work, especially considering in India, it's a very unique structure in the government, different from other parts of the world, so other issues to contend with there. Any reactions to Panagiotis' comment?
I'd like to say that yes, resources. Again, I think I'd mentioned that we had actually done a state level study in Kerala, and this issue of resources had come up over and over again. But another thing that I've noticed, that we've noticed while working with cities or with working with subnational actors in India, is that if at the state level, for example, the climate change department of Gujarat is very strong. Similarly, in Madhya Pradesh, what we've noticed is EPCO, which is the Environment Planning and Coordination Organization, is a very strong agency. So having these, and it's the nodal agency for climate related issues, and having these kind of state level agencies sort of help facilitate this process. And in fact, even in Madhya Pradesh, they haven't done city level vulnerability assessments, but they have published district level vulnerability assessment. And in a lot of the cases in India, if you take city boundaries and if you take district boundaries, they tend to overlap. So again, I mean, I guess as someone who's trying to make do with what's available out there, district level vulnerability, assessments, or that is one way of looking for adaptation related data at the city level.
That's really helpful, Avni. Thank you so much. Perhaps we will take this chance to go to the next slide, just keeping an eye on the time as well. There's only 2 more slides to frame the conversation. So really, I encourage you to add anything that you're thinking around data collection at this point. It'd be really helpful to hear, and there's a great opportunity with the colleagues online to discuss. So I think we've already talked a bit about the action or the access to national regional level support, but this in particular is thinking about when doing a risk and vulnerability assessment and thinking about how climate and economic data is handled in the country. So I do think we've touched on that a bit, and it sounds as if there are national data sets, perhaps not accessible, but they certainly exist. And then more importantly, it sounds like there needs to be more of these state level data collection agencies or monitoring agencies that can help more clearly with the local circumstances, but those don't necessarily exist everywhere. Gujarat has, of course, come up as a great example where that does already exist. But any thoughts around how that access to climate and economic data is currently handled versus how things might be changing in the future? What about thinking about key data gaps and developing an assessment and how this is different for different sectors of the city? Is it easier to find some of that data for certain sectors than for others?
Sharon, for climate risk and vulnerability assessment, as you mentioned rightly, state normally does it. Like cities, they do not have this mechanism to assess the risk, the climate risk. But there are many cities in the country. They have their own mechanism to assess their own assessment, in the sense that the risk, and not only man-made risk. I mean, not only natural disaster, even man-made disasters. They have ascertained, and they have collected the data themselves. But like very few cities, you can say that they have this. So that information, it's a big challenge. And unless we know what is going to be basically the risk involved, it'll be difficult for the cities subsequently to go ahead in ensuring that climate plan is appropriately implemented, and this risk are appropriately addressed. But that mechanism need to be and even this CSCF, what we have it at a national level, that also does not talk about the kind of risk charges. So that's a big challenge like we have it.
And is that, so that sounds a bit like there needs to be drive from the national level to encourage state and city level to collect this data and to show why that is necessary to put this effort and resources towards doing that. Is that true?
Yeah, many studies are done. Yeah. Many studies are done by independent agencies, but it is not available at one central location. So there is no repository. Like it's a scattered data available. A lot of study is done by independent agencies. That's a big challenge.
And do you think there's a effort around information management in the climate space, or one that potentially maybe a local university is thinking of undertaking, or some of the extensive work by experts out there? Surely someone has said we need to start creating a clearinghouse where everyone can go to one place and find information in an organized fashion.
Yeah. I mean, that needs to be done, and that's an effort. Currently, we are making. We are moving in that direction to ensure that such data gets available at one central location at a city level.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that's a huge challenge everywhere. Everyone needs their own organizational structure that wants to come in and do that work. So I know we only have 30 seconds left, and I apologize. The last slide is really looking at the Common Reporting Framework, which Paulo talked about earlier. And I think it's just a quick idea of how familiar is everyone with the Common Reporting Framework, and what context do cities need in order to facilitate the data collection. So I don't know. Well, we just have 5 seconds, and we're about to be moved back to the main group. But a question for thoughts later, perhaps.